It's probably my final exhibition for the year, but this weekend I went to Gaydon to see the Great British Model Railway Show. We start the show at the Leamington Warwick Model Railway Club's O-gauge layout, Kimble. We see a Class 15 D8209 coming into the station on a passenger service. As it comes to a stop, a Ginty can be seen moving off shed in the background. The layout has no fixed location, but many of its buildings are based on the structures of the BR London Midland region. As the diesel departs, another local service in the hands of either 2MT 46472 arrives in the station. This large layout has a wealth of detail, including accurately modelled semaphore signalling. The eye that departs passing through the nearest scenic section for this layout. I last saw Kimble back in 2019 at the Leamington and Warwick Model Railway Club's very own show. Moving to the other end of the layout, another local service, this time in the hands of a Fowler 4F43985, passes on the viaduct. The final shot of Kimble sees ex-War Department Austerity 280 passing with a short goods train. Ellesmere is a scale replica of the station situated on the Cambrian main line. Here we see ex-GWR Mogul 6378 shunting milk wagons from its train.
Because you've got the up and down, and you've got the loop, and you've got the stop.
Indeed. Well, they're in the book.
The layout is operated to a timetable, and as the Mogul brings its wagons into the platform, it rushes to run round before the arrival of the auto train. The actual Ellesmere station closed in 1965, but the detail here really brings the layout to life. The station building alone is an impressive model. There's a wealth of other detail on the layout as well. Telegraph poles along the line, water tower, semaphore signals, and even the equipment for the post train.
that because I'm going to shunt inside the yard, so you can just take over then, can't you?
The mogul moves the wagons out of the way just in time for the arrival of the auto train under the hands of a 14XX class. Kyle of Macallan is an EM gauge layout. It is a locomotive shed set somewhere in the northwest Highlands of Scotland. The layout is based on, but not an exact copy of, the shed at Clydach. And coincidentally, the shed lost its roof in a fire shortly after the end of steam, remarkably similar to events at Clydach. Here, Class 26 D5339 moves on shed.
They say they've got them on their website, right? So they say. Yeah. Would that literally get me to go back? Or no? Couldn't possibly come.
A short while later, on Type 1 D8032, Class 20, with a tablet catcher in the cab side, moves off shed.
I've got a draw.
Yeah, I can see it.
No, not that one.
We move on to the next EM gauge layout, Chester's Yard. The layout is set in the 1970s blue era. And here we can see Class 24 24125 shunting the yard as a rat rests in the shed. We head overseas now and stop in France, at Villefranche-La-Chapelle. This is a small layout designed to show a shunting yard in a fictional French town in the 1990s, serving a few industries at the same time, and based on memories of traditional French railways, sadly mostly gone now. The area to the right was possibly once a quarry, but is now used to handle local timber and stone traffic, while the sidings to the left serve the industries of the small town on the hill behind. There's also a higher level line in and out platform to allow an auto rail or two to be run. We'll have a closer look at the detail, including the chapel in the background, as we move and pan across to see a shunting loco about to move some wagons around the yard. The idea of the layout was to create the atmosphere of a typical French small town and its still active rail system, something that had disappeared from the British rail scene in the 1960s, but which could still be enjoyed in France for many years afterwards. With the addition of catenary in parts of the shunting yard, it is now possible to see AC or DC electric engines as well as diesel power. As the shunter goes about its business, on the high level, a passenger train arrives at the station.
Just to see what it's like.
We now move across the Atlantic to Purgatory Peak, an ON30 scale narrow gauge railroad. This is set in the late 1930s, and times are hard. The railroad just keeps plodding on, but nothing much changes in this part of the world, not unless it has to. The railroads around Purgatory Peak were conceived in the euphoria of the mining boom of the late 19th century, when deposits of several heavy metals, including gold and silver, have been discovered. The booming American economy created ever-increasing demands, and pack horses were simply not quick enough to deliver, and so the Denver and Colorado Western was born. Here we see a freight passing through the station of this quite ugly scenery, but wonderfully modern. The scenery really does give the feeling of a dry and dusty area to be working in, and it is fantastic to look at. The sheer size of the layout is impressive itself. We move along to the end of the layout, where a shay-geared locomotive is about to depart the mine with a couple of loaded cars. As the locomotive moves over the trestle bridge, a loaded coal train passes underneath. TGB Metal Recyclers is a 7mm scale O-gauge layout. TGB Metal Recycling and Block Paving are scrap processors located in the fictional town of Fulchester. Anyone who reads Viz magazine will know which town that is. Here we're watching a Class 20 shunt the yard. The layout detail is impressive, and the majority of the rolling stock is also scratch built by the owner. Next is a brief whistle stop at Rosamund Street on the low-level sidings, as we see a Class 25 doing a bit of shunting.
Oh, is all that? I love all that.
Yeah, because it's all blue.
The sidings are located in the shadow of a British Steel Company works in a run-down part of town. This is the sort of place where 1970s train spotters would need to go in order to find that elusive shunter or two that have still to be underlined in their combined volumes. The layout is operated as a shunting puzzle, using photographic cards relating to each of the wagons used in the layout.
Because buildings and things like that, they disappeared in some rapid. That's my inspiration for years to come, the models.
We now move to Cornwall, and this layout, Corwenna, is a 4mm scale 00 gauge fictional location inspired by the branch line from Boscawen Junction to Wentford Bridge. The buildings, although much reduced in scale, purport to give a flavour of operations at the clay dries served by the BT well tanks, which can be seen here shunting the layout.
So that's what I've got going up it.
It's a wonderful looking layout, and certainly has that feel of the China Clay Works based around Cornwall.
I've got to say, I mean, I'm going to tone it down with some satin.
While the dries are the dominant part of the layout, there's some great detail scattered around. The allotments in front of the sidings are a particular favourite of mine.
You know, I'm really impressed with it.
I was going to bring it and run it here, but you'd have people saying, what's that doing here?
It was actually off one of my son's.
We're now at Leigh Bridge Stabling Point, a small stabling and refuelling point set at the end of a freight yard. This 00 gauge layout is a what if the railway lines around Leigh, near Manchester, had remained open. It's set in the BR Blue diesel era. Here we can see a 47 shunting around before the very lovely Technical Services Class 24 moves out of one siding to move into another. For a small layout, there's a lot of action going on. Before the 24 has even moved to its new siding, Class 31 moves off point, getting ready for its next trip. And of course, no diesel-based layout would be complete without a Class 47. Falahill is a circular N-gauge layout that represents part of the Waverley route between 1964 through to 1969, whereupon it closed in the January of that year. The layout is fully DCC operated, with all locomotives in stock, typical of those that ran on the line during the final 5 or 6 years of operation. Here, a pair of Claytons are working a metals train, whilst at the station, the Class 40 comes to a halt. The layout is a full circle and it works really well. It gives a feeling of a fast main line and looks natural when it's built.
Press 2. Here, that will stop it.
The Class 40 finally departs with the express service, as in the opposite direction the Class 24 arrives with a local stopping train.
Yeah, John, right, you're right. You're set for that.
Next is some vintage third rail O gauge on Ripon. Just listen to the sound of that rolling stock. The layout is based on the former Newcastle to Leeds main line set in the 1930s. Next is the N-gauge layout Coketown. Here we see a Class 68 on the nuclear fuels train as the 66 pulls out of the station with a coal train. Coketown is set in the Lancashire town made famous in Charles Dickens's novel Hard Times. Now in the 21st century, situated on the West Coast main line around 2015, the town has been cleaned up somewhat. Many of the mills and chimneys are gone, replaced by warehouses and shopping areas, but some of the old buildings are still left in the town centre near the station. The station was rebuilt in the 1990s, but some of the original old parts of the station are left. I particularly like how the viaduct is modelled to blend in with the photographic back scene, as seen in this shot here. As the DRS 37 arrives at Coketown with some Pullman coaches, the opposite direction sees a Pacer unit arrive on a local service.
Because you can just reuse something like magnetism on the floor.
It means it will detect any local.
Are you professional in electronics?
Next is Great Endon, a double O gauge layout set in Lancashire.
Because one of the managers saw the.
Here we see a Northern Rail 156 come to a stand at the signal as it waits a road to get to the platform. Great Endon is a fictional location in Lancashire, set on the proposed extension of the Preston to Longbridge branch that was never built. Had this line been extended, it would have finished at Clydach, allowing a direct link to the Sutton to Carlisle line. The layout features working semaphore signals, with point interlocking and DCC control allowing for realistic full independent control of the trains. Here we see a Balfour BT Tampa as it moves from the station platform to shunt into one of the sidings.
Excuse me, is that how I took it?
We move on to the 009 gauge layouts of the exhibition. This is Full Mill. Based on the Ashover Light Railway in Derbyshire, this tabletop layout shows what can be achieved in 009. Although the loop is freelance, the yard, the mill and the powerhouse are based on the buildings that still remain on the site today. It's a whistle stop at Brandgeight as we watch a small 040 loco run through the scenery with a passenger train. Next is the Clydach Railway. The layout represents a fictional preserved tourist railway situated somewhere on the coast of northwest Wales. There are some superb locos on this layout, and the Garretts are particularly enjoyable to watch running around the track. Here we see one working a service from the top station down the incline towards the bottom of the layout. The owner of the layout has given it a full fictional history and has imagined that the original line was built to carry slate from the quarries in the mountains down to the port. After commercial operations ceased, the Clydach Railway Preservation Society took over the ownership of the railway in 1954 and reopened it. The line later expanded onto the trackbed and bridges of a standard gauge branch line which had closed in the 1960s. The new section was opened in 1979 and since then passenger numbers have grown. Here we see one of the other Garretts on the line working from the top station down to the bottom, crossing over the estuary on the bridge. It's absolutely beautiful detail on this layout. It's fantastic to watch the trains run round. If you've liked this video and would like to see more exhibition videos, or if you're interested in my layout build, then please like and subscribe, or even go into my channel and see some of my previous videos of other exhibitions. Thanks for watching.